What's going on, fellas? I hope you guys are doing well, and welcome to another episode of the Short Men Only podcast. And I'm fired up today. I am fired up. And you're like, why are you fired up? Because we're here. It's another episode. I'm happy. I'm excited about this episode. We're gonna talk today about validation. It was one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot this past week about why is validation so important? Where should it come from? Where do we usually seek it? And how it affects our life? And to talk about this, I thought of a great example of, we're going all the way back to The Lion King. When Mufasa took Simba up to the top of the hill. We're going to talk about the significance of that. But anyway, man, I just really hope you guys are excited and fired up as I am for this episode. And there's nothing like, getting ready to record and you're listening to some music that you just really just gets you in the mood to just record to get this done. For me, I was listening to a little bit of that. I went old school today. I was listening to a little bit of that Summer in Miami with Trey Songz and Jim Jones. Man, I love that song because I love the art of storytelling. And in that song, you really go on this journey, and you can kind of see everything he's saying in the way he used the analogy of seasons to talk about women and all these different things. Man, it's an amazing song, and it just got me fired up and just ready to go. And so we gonna go. I hope you guys are strapped in and ready, because Short Men Only, the podcast now begins. All right, so I was thinking about this thing called validation, and it's an interesting thing because validation is something that all of us men need. But there's a problem with that. Because we all need it, we don't always all go to get it from the right place. The place it should come from is our fathers or someone who was an elderly person someone in our life. Our grandfather, could have been anybody when we were growing up. Someone like that, an uncle or someone, should have given us that validation when we were younger. But for a lot of men, a lot of us, we don't get it there. So what we do is we search for the validation in others. We look for others to validate us. When we don't get it in childhood, the place we should be getting it from is within. But that's almost the last place that we look. So I wanted to talk about this and how this looks, as validation, how this plays out when we don't get it. And trust me, I understand quite well how, and I would consider myself, actually we'll get into that. Let's go with this example. So I want you guys to think about The Lion King. And honestly, I hadn't seen The Lion King in a long time. But this scene stuck out to me in The Lion King. And I think it's important for our conversation. There's a scene in The Lion King where Mufasa takes Simba to the cliff. And he tells him that everything the light touches is their kingdom. So Simba's out there looking like, wow, everything the light touches is our kingdom. And Mufasa's like, yeah, everything the light touches. And Mufasa explains to him that it will one day be his. And so it's not only did he get to see it, but he understands that one day it will be his and that he will be king. And doing this thing, we're on the mountain and they're looking out. Simba sees the shadowy place. And Mufasa tells his son, you should never go there because our kingdom does not cover that area. And you have no protection there. So what I want to get to is this first piece of this. So as I stated earlier, I said that usually the validation should come from your father or the male type figure in your life when you're young. In this situation, Mufasa takes him to the mountain, explains to him who he is and what is his. So he did two things. He let him know that he has a place in this world, and he showed him that he not only has a place, but he has value and he has a mission. His father showed him all of that by taking him up to the mountain. And his father also showed him where not to go. See, now, as we all know the story, he doesn't quite take his father's advice, which is, kind of how it goes. We go on that journey ourselves, and we don't always listen to the wisdom that we're given. And he did not. And I will come back to that later, because I think there's some interesting pieces of that too. So I was thinking about this in my own life, and I was thinking about this in other men's lives. So for me, I did not know my father, my biological father. I do not have any real recollection of him. But I did have, my mom married my stepdad when I was 10 years old. And so my stepdad then came into my life and filled the role for me of a father. And, there was a lot of us, but what he never wavered on was his belief in me and his belief that I could do something, right? So but I didn't recognize it then. So I didn't, as a lot of men, I didn't take that as validation at that time. I thought that was just, I don't know. I'm not going to say, I just didn't take it as validation. We'll just leave it at that. I didn't know to take it as validation. So we'll say that. What happens is, and I see this a lot on, when we have these conversations on social media about short men, the first thing that comes out of their mouth is, not all, I'm talking about the ones that do. The ones that do, you know who you are, so I'm talking to you. The first thing is to think that they won't be able to get a woman. And what that really means, and this is how it played out in my life, is that is the first place that you are seeking validation from. And so a lot of men will go down this road of trying to get validation from a woman and trying to have her validate you and affirm you. And the reason being is because you were not validated and affirmed while you were younger. And it is something you still need. So you go and look for the validation. And I know for me, I went and looked for the validation in women. I thought that if I had a woman and she loved and appreciated me, then that was going to validate me, because I know I felt like I needed that validation, so I thought that would do it for me. And one of the interesting things, I think, as men, you will learn that my goal is that you do not have to learn this the hard way. That's why we're having these conversations, these tough conversations, and I'm being honest with you guys about what has happened to me, and I'm also being honest about so you can avoid it, right? So the validation that I was seeking from a woman, once you understand the concept that he who giveth can also taketh. So if my validation came from a woman, well, when she took that validation away, she no longer validated me, maybe, for whatever reason, she no longer validated me. Then because I leaned on her for validation, it took away my validation for myself. So now I am back in this jungle of looking for this, running through the forest and looking for validation again, because where I thought it was, it no longer is. That person took it. See, and it's almost essentially like I don't know if you've ever heard the Bible story of Samson and Delilah. Well, when Delilah, I don't know if that's exactly when she cut his hair, she took his strength. And so it is almost, and he was lost after that. He was unable to do the things that he was able to do before that. And it is the same thing when you give someone the power to validate who you are. When they take that away, they have taken your strength, because you have given them the power to make you strong by changing, by becoming whoever they thought you should be once you got that validation from that person. And it is a hard road, because once you have that feeling of being validated, you don't want to just give that up, especially when you didn't have it before. So you do things that, you might have boundaries that you allow the person to cross. You might put up with things that you normally wouldn't put up with, because your self-worth, your validation is tied up into that person. It's tied up into that person. Now, and I say this because I'm trying to be careful in saying this just in the way that I say this, because I don't want short men to now walk around and say, well, because I didn't get validation in childhood, that means I don't have to do the work. You absolutely have to do the work of trying to validate yourself. You just now know, hey, this was supposed to be something that happened for me in childhood. And the African cultures, there's a point where the boy must lead the mother and go learn to be a man from his father and the rest of the men in the village. There comes that point. We don't have that now, especially in a lot of homes where the fathers are absent, where that rite of passage, that rite of validation isn't there. And when a single family home, it falls on the mother to do this, which she cannot do. And so we have a bunch of men, not only short men, but I'm talking to short men. A lot of us are looking for validation out there in the world, trying to get people to validate who we are and who we're supposed to be. And so we do things that seek attention, like, wanting to be that guy in the club that can buy all the bottles, and just all these things that we do for validation. It's just because we're missing that key piece. Now, what I want to really drive home with this validation thing is that we have to stop trying to seek validation outwardly and just understand that no one outside of ourselves, once we've crossed over into that adulthood, can validate us. We have to then validate ourselves. Now, we can have other men to support us in this process of becoming and validating ourselves. We may have men that support us, but we have to do the work. And there's a lot of benefits that come with us doing this work. Well, we're not so much, our validation isn't swayed by who likes us at this moment or who doesn't like us at this moment. When our validation is not external, we have more self-confidence, we have much more self-worth. We believe that we have a purpose, that we are here for a reason. These are just a few of the benefits of having this feeling of validation from within yourself. And you can get out of that, because I think one of the things too, and here was probably the biggest benefit. I know me, when I felt like I needed validation from other people, I was always super Mr. Nice Guy. You don't want to rub anybody the wrong way. You don't want to say anything to hurt anybody's feelings because, you don't want anybody to not like you or not appreciate you because that's where your validation came from. So you let people do things that deep down inside that would, piss you off or make you mad, but you don't say anything because, your validation comes from these people. And I remember one time, and this sticks out in my head because it was just such a nice guy moment, but on the inside it made me upset. And why did it make me upset? I think it made me upset because I didn't want to say anything. I just was cool with it. And it's not, and you and I don't want to give you the wrong idea when I say the story, but it was my truth at that time. So I went to a restaurant and I paid, and after I got done paying, the lady shorted me part of my change without asking me. She just shorted me. And it wasn't one of those things where you can tell if it was an accident. It was enough to where it was just like, okay, you just really just felt comfortable just shorting me. And with on the inside, I just wanted to say, hey, it wasn't even about the money. It wasn't about the change that she shorted me because I can care less. It was really about the fact that I noticed, but I was afraid to say something. And it was just because I didn't want to not be a nice guy in that moment and complain about something that I felt like, hey, I gave you the amount that for the service. You're supposed to give me back exactly what I just, my exact change. You don't get to decide for me if I want to give you extra money. Like, that is not something that is within your right to do. But the fact that I just couldn't say anything, I just felt like, damn, it's that nice guy thing. And I think that's one of the biggest grave mistakes us short men make, is always trying to be the nice guy. And that is tied into this validation piece that we have and we feel like we need from others. And I really just want to encourage you got to break through that. And it plays out sometimes, and still now today when I think about even with as I stated in the first episode, I'm pretty transparent. I was scared when I first put out this podcast because none of my real audience on any of these platforms were short men. They weren't that demographics. But this was the demographics I felt like I'm supposed to speak to, because this is the one I resonate with the most. This is the one I struggle with the most. And this is what I felt. I just felt like I was doing other things that were good, but not what I should. I like that, what I just did there. And so, putting myself out there, it was just within the last couple of days that I actually put myself out there to an even bigger podcast group, saying, hey, that I'm going to do this, and I'm doing this, not going to do this, that I'm doing this, and this is why I'm doing it, to just to get extra eyes on the podcast. Well, of course, it worked, to get the extra eyes on the podcast and all that stuff, right? But it was interesting. One of the comments that was made after I made this post was a woman left a comment saying that she wanted to come on the podcast and talk about why women can't date men under 5'6". And I read that and I was thinking, is it can't or won't? Because there is no hard and fast rule about whether someone can date someone under 5'6" or not. This is just something that this person has determined. But it made me think. It used to be a long time ago that this would have been something that made me mad, because here is a woman rejecting. I'm not even single. I'm married and happily married. But here goes a woman rejecting based off of height. But if I still thought that my validation comes from women about my height, that would make me mad. So there's a lot of you that would see a comment like that. And because your validation comes from, you believe your validation will come from a woman, seeing that type of comment will piss you off. But when you understand that your validation can never come from a woman, then you are free to allow women who choose not to want to date short men or whatever their hang up is around that. You understand that that's not your problem, and who cares? Like, they're just missing out on somebody that would be, that could possibly be good for them. That's on them. But it's one of those things that we just don't realize, all these different ways, like our validation is can be tied up in things. And there's a lot of dudes out there who validation comes from going to the strip club, throwing a lot of money. But what I would prescribe to you is that those are the shadowy places that Mufasa was telling Simba to stay out of. Going online, Pornhub, spending all your money on porn instead of, I know it's, they got the free stuff, but I'm sure they got the stuff you can pay for. But, just going and spending all your money on those type of things, right? Those are the shadowy places. And when we don't have that validation, those can be the spaces that we are comfortable, because we are being validated by people for the wrong reasons. And sometimes the light is what frees us, but the shadows is where a lot of us feel more comfortable. And so I just want you guys to think about this, and this validation when it comes to, you now. And I don't like telling you guys to think about stuff without giving you some actionable steps. And one of the actionable steps that, I'm going to give you 3, but the first one is, like, be honest with yourself. Do you feel like, was your father around? Do you feel like someone in your childhood, was your uncle, your grandpa, was anybody sat you down and kind of just validated you and your existence and just let you know that you are good enough, you are enough, and that you do have worth? Do you feel like any man in your life did that for you? And it just, it's just a question to think about that. And you're not, at this point, is the purpose of this question is not to, if that didn't happen for you, it's not to shame your dad or whoever it was for them not doing it. It's just understanding it didn't get done. So once you understand that, well, be honest with yourself. What are some ways and some places and things you've done to seek validation? Are you the super nice guy that never talks back, lets people run over them because you want people to like you? Like, be honest with yourself. You got to sit down and ask yourself these questions. And then the third thing you got to ask yourself is, what would it look like to validate myself? Like, how would I respond to certain situations if I believe that my validation comes from within? How would I do that? And then you start, once you've looked at these 3 things, then you start trying to apply those things. You apply everything you learned in the third thing to your life. You start trying to, now this isn't going to be an overnight thing. This is going to be a process, baby. But you want to start looking for ways to validate yourself. And in those moments, maybe you're like, I had this moment where you're like me. You went to the counter, hey, you guys can give me back my change. I want the rest of my change. Okay, well that's a start because you're able to speak up and say, hey, this is what I feel was wrong. This is what I would like to see done, and you demand that respect. Now I know this is a lot. It was a lot for me when I started thinking about it because we all want to have these questions answered. Am I enough? Do I have worth? And there's nothing wrong with wanting to know the answers to those questions. That is why when dealing with people, respect is the biggest thing for a man because it is it's another part of that importance, how we feel our importance when someone respects us. So I want to tell you, you are enough and you do have worth. But I want to encourage you to do the work to find that worth within yourself because it's important. And I cannot do it for you. I can support you on your journey, but I cannot do this for you. Some roads, you have to be willing to walk on your own. Because if I validate you and, I'm gone, then your validation is gone. But if you validate you and I can support you in validating you, well, that sounds like a winning ticket to me. Now, the last thing I want you to think about. I was thinking about this imagination thing. Because I will tell you guys, I have big, big dreams and like really big dreams. And sometimes we convince ourselves that we don't deserve these things or we're not worthy of these things. So this week coming up, I want you to intentionally believe, to start dreaming, start thinking about what you would like your life to be like. Also, I want you to start finding things that you enjoy about your life already. Like what brings you joy and gratitude in your life already. And see how you can duplicate and have more of those experiences this week. I want you to be intentional about that. Because what I believe is the more you can focus on the things you do want instead of focusing on all the things that you don't want, the more things that you do want will start to appear into your life. We spend too much time focusing on what we don't want and then get mad because it keeps growing. Well, you keep focusing on it. It's just like a plant. You keep watering the plant, it's going to grow. Well, you keep watering everything you don't want in your life, it's going to keep growing. It's the same concept. So I just need you guys to get that and understand that. And I just want to say again, you are enough. Short men, you do have worth, but you've got to do the work to believe it. And if you didn't receive it in childhood, you got to stop blaming people for not giving it to you. Now it's your job, it's your journey, it's your mission to go and find it for yourself. Now, I just want to say, I hope you guys have a amazing week. I gave you your homework. And I also want to make an announcement. Next week, we are going to start the Short Men Only newsletter. Yes, baby, I'm coming with the newsletter. I'm going to send you once a week. I'm going to send you an encouraging tip and some things I've learned throughout the week to help you become the best version of yourself. So I look forward to providing that, and I'll have the links in the description for you guys to sign up. But I'm excited. I'm really taking this Short Men podcast to a whole nother level. I really want to reach as many short men as I possibly can because I care about you guys, and you don't got to do this alone. We are better together. All right. Enjoy your week. Thank you again for listening to that Short Men Only podcast with your boy, Jalal Wilson. Be blessed.